Okay, whenever you guys are.
Hey guys, welcome back to WallBuilders. You have seen us do videos around this room before. Most of the artifacts we have, most of the historical things actually are in the next room though. So we thought, why don't we just take a little time, show you some of the next room and some of the details we do in there. So we're just gonna walk this way, but our microphones are still on so you can still hear us. Excuse us. Okay, so this is an active library. We do research down here. Most stuff we do online. However, we do have a lot of original documents.
And, right, we do that online, not because we don't have the originals, but to preserve them, right? Oftentimes, institutions like Harvard, Yale, Google Books has millions of books
Correct.
online, and so if it's in the public domain, oftentimes you can find it already scanned and online, and oftentimes word searchable too, which is really helpful. And so we do that to preserve the books.
That's right.
And then if we really need to come down and check it, we'll check it in the original just to be extra safe.
Yeah,
But
generally, that's right. We're generally pulling out the original. Once we found the online version and searched and read through that, we go, okay, let's just make sure it's what the original still says. Nonetheless, we have a lot of originals down here, so there's a lot of cool stuff around us. We have file cabinets, we have bookshelves over on this side.
both really cool things.
Yeah. Not so much the cabinets and bookshelves,
What's
more of what's
inside.
on or
Yeah,
inside. Yeah. So we have shelves that are full of signatures, that are full of old sermons, that are full of old newspapers. This is pretty fun. These are signed documents from some fairly significant and
Right.
famous people at some point.
This is actually from John Adams, signed by him.
That is a military commission when he was president. Here's one from Stephen Hopkins, and we put on the bottom, just so you know, Declaration signer Stephen Hopkins. And you can notice the incredible detail of going on, and this is done with quill pen, so that's pretty remarkable. You have things also like John Quincy Adams, who was also a president, his signature down here, a pretty famous name in American history, also Patrick Henry, or as his friends knew him, P. Henry. So this is Patrick Henry, who was governor of Virginia, gave the famous "Give me liberty, give me death" speech. So this is full of documents and signatures from
just
various people
keeps going.
as it goes down.
Keeps going.
On this other side, though, so one of the favorite things that we have is in these portfolios, these specifically, you can see on the end they say proclamations, and they have dates of when those are. One of the things we have in our collection is more than 800 original prayer proclamations throughout American history. And the reason I think these are great for us to collect, and you might have seen some before, we've talked about some of the John Hancock or the Sam Adams or John Adams or George Washington. But the reason the proclamations are important is because when people make the accusation, well, the founding fathers weren't really religious, America never was a Christian nation, and all the things that are said, blah, blah, blah. All we have to do is point back and go, wait a second.
Because these aren't just regular proclamations, these are prayer proclamations for two different types of day.
And they're also from governors, from presidents, or from Congress. And sometimes it would be the federal Congress or a state legislative body that might be calling their state to pray. But all these are government documents. And as you're mentioning, generally for one of two reasons.
So one of the types would be prayer, humiliation, and fasting. And that's for times and periods of great trial, great hardship. In fact, there was a legislator up in one of the northern states who actually was trying to reintroduce one of Abraham Lincoln's prayer and fasting proclamations that he gave during the middle of the American Civil War. She actually was kind of attacked for doing that, even though it's a process that's been done for hundreds of years in American history. And so you would have that time, and then if God listened to those prayers, if he answered those prayers, they would come back around and issue a Thanksgiving proclamation like, all right, guys, so we prayed asking for God's help. He helped us. We need to be like, one of the lepers who goes back. We need to go back and thank God for his protection, for his providence. So you would have these prayer proclamations throughout the year, depending on what's going on.
And a lot of times, in some states, they were very consistent. In the spring, they would do prayer, humiliation, and fasting. The reason was, if we're farmers, we need the rain every single spring. And then every fall, when harvest time would roll around, you would do a prayer and thanksgiving proclamation, thanking God for his provision throughout the year, for whatever else has happened. And many times it'd be very situational, as you're pointing out. Throughout the American Revolution, for example, when we're going to war against the British and Congress says, we really need God's help, prayer and fasting. And then you would see some unimaginable situation where the American military should have been defeated, but God's hand of providence, as they saw it, protected them, and they said, we need to thank God that he just protected and rescued and whatever the case was. So you see this pretty consistent throughout American history. Anyway, so that's one thing of these prayer proclamations. One of my favorites, though, is right down here. This is a 3-volume set, and we're going to walk out and put it on the table. So this is known as the Florence Schmitt collection. The reason we call it the Florence Schmitt collection is the lady who donated, and I'm saying that a little loosely because the way the story goes, she was an elderly person in, I think she was Florida at the time. She was in assisted living and she had no family. She decided she wanted to sell the estate and hired a lawyer to come in, oversee selling off the estate, and then she was going to give the money away. So the lawyer comes in and does the estate sale and then goes to Miss Florence Schmitt and she says, well, whatever's left, just throw it away, clean the house out, then we're selling the house. So this lawyer hires a company. They come in, they're cleaning out the house, throwing stuff away. He said, I watched some guys go up in the attic. They were coming out with trunks. As they were coming out, they were just going to go throw them away. He said, I couldn't in good conscience watch them just go throw these trunks away without at least checking to see what was in it. So he opened up the trunk and he found old letters. But not just old letters.
Oh, no.
He said, I looked and there was names written on these letters that I recognized.
Yeah,
names like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and James Madison and Abraham Lincoln. And he said, oh, hold up a second. So he went back and said, Florence, I found these old letters and it seems like they're from presidents. She said, oh yeah, I had this aunt who collected letters from every president from George Washington all the way through Dwight Eisenhower. She said, but I don't need those anymore. Just throw them away.
Oh my gosh.
He said, well, a lot of people like this stuff. Can I see if somebody wants them? Well, he knew WallBuilders, contacted WallBuilders, said, hey, would you guys be interested? And of course, we're going, oh my gosh, yes. So these were donated, and sometimes people donate stuff that's not always great. This is one of the most amazing donations ever. So these are actual presidential letters. This is an actual George Washington letter. And so you see, this is him, and we'll take it out, which we normally don't do, but it's okay. We'll be very careful. So George Washington was writing and asking for help at Mount Vernon, and it's really torn. We're being very careful. Down here at the bottom, you see a signature, G. Washington. So that is a letter from George Washington, and as you go, you find, and here's other signatures from George Washington as well. So there's signatures from him. This is all part of the collection. But you begin to see letters from other presidents. This is one from John Adams. And you actually can even see the age of John Adams in his own handwriting because his writing gets a little worse as he gets a little older later in life. But these are from John Adams. This is one from Thomas Jefferson. So the collection goes on. James Madison, we have letters, at least one letter from every single president from George Washington all the way up through Dwight Eisenhower. Now, we've also extended that collection, so we've tried to get letters from every single president because that's a really cool thing to have in the collection. This is just one of the many really cool things.
And you can tell a lot about the presidents because of their signatures. So like, right, George Washington is kind of about middle of the road on how good it looks. Like it's legible, but there are some things that, you can struggle with it.
His penmanship, right? His different writing style, sure.
And then you get to somebody like Andrew Jackson, and that is nearly impossible to read.
He just kind of scribbles a little bit.
And then you get somebody like this. So this is a letter written by John Quincy Adams while he was president of the United States. It's from 1825. And look at that handwriting. It is unbelievably good. I mean, it is.
It could be a computer font. Is what that could be.
The lines
it's
are perfectly
super impressive.
Straight, super well written. I mean, you can read everything. It's in cursive. Quill pen. It is crazy good. And I think probably that translates into a lot of their education. I think John Quincy Adams, probably a top 3 most intelligent president.
So, highly educated, spoke so many languages, and really had one of the most impressive resumes. Growing up, his father, obviously, John Adams. John Quincy grew up in the middle of the Revolution, so when John Adams goes over to Europe, John Quincy gets to go with his father on several occasions. An assistant to his father, the diplomat. He's a secretary. He then gets
Russia.
He goes to Russia, I think when he's 14 years old. When the revolution's finally over, George Washington becomes president. He then is chosen by George Washington to be a diplomat for America. Washington said he's the best diplomat America ever had.
He's still really young, in his 20s.
He's in his 20s. Under his father, John Adams, he then is also a diplomat. Under Thomas Jefferson, he becomes a U.S. Senator. Under James Madison, he's a diplomat. Under James Monroe, he's Secretary of State. He then became the 6th President of the United States. After that, he goes back to Congress, and this is when he wanted to see the great evil of slavery stopped in America. Right? So there's so much to his story. We don't have to tell the whole story right now. but really, really educated, amazing resume, very impressive guy. And so these are just a few of the things we have at WallBuilders. And if you followed us for long, you know we try to do a lot with what we say the forgotten history and heroes of our nation. And in an era where people know very little history, and most of the people that should be heroes are largely villainized today, they're only villains because we don't know most of their story. And when you learn the rest of the story, and especially in the context of the time in which they lived, we would never say that any of these guys were perfect, because our starting place is that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
Yep.
So we think everybody's jacked up and needs Jesus. Even you watching, you need Jesus, right? That's our belief as Christians, as people of faith. We know we need a Savior, which is why we're so grateful Jesus came. So our starting place isn't that people are basically good and they don't need a Savior. No. I don't expect anybody to be basically good, except what's really impressive about so many heroes in America is the way God uses imperfect people and uses them to do really impressive and amazing things. So we try to keep telling some of those stories. Next week, we're so excited. We're going to start a series looking at the American Revolution. So on Monday, we're going to, and obviously depending on what happens with lockdowns and shutdowns, but this is our plan right now, is on Monday, we're going to start a series looking at the American Revolution and just kind of going through some of that history. So hopefully we'll see you guys on Monday.